Welcome back to another episode of the Heroes Veritas podcast. I'm your host, Tim Bass, and I do apologize as this episode is coming out late. If you follow me on social media, I spent the weekend in Salt Lake City, Utah for Sean Whalen's Lions Not Sheep, Lions Den Live event. Sorry, kind of a mouthful. It was a 3-day event where I got to network with a lot of people and hear a lot of people speak that are very successful, very intelligent, and very articulated. I've been in the Lions Den for, I don't know, close to a year now. And a lot of people wonder why I'm in another coach's group when I'm a coach. And the reality is that everybody should be seeking advice, counsel, knowledge, and leveling themselves up. I also always recommend to find a group of like-minded people so that you can leverage their experience, their tactics, their skill sets, as well as their belief in what you're doing. It really does help to get inspired, to be in an energy that aligns with what you're trying to do and where you're trying to go. Sean Whalen has put together something that I really enjoy personally, mostly for the networking aspect. He does bring quite a lot of knowledge and skill sets to the table as far as himself and the people he makes accessible to his members. But really, this last weekend was extremely enjoyable for me and very, what's the word I'm looking for? Validating? No, validating is not the word because I don't really like that. Confirming that I'm on the right path, because I got to sit with people and really sit down for long periods of time with individuals that I've never met before, from different backgrounds, different success levels, different verticals of business, and really talk about the state of the world, talk about the state of men, talk about the state of women, masculinity, femininity, and business. And we're all really, well, a lot of us, I shouldn't say all of us, but a good number of us are really aware of what's going on. And I think a lot of people get stuck because they just don't know how to get started or what to do, or maybe who they feel they are. Maybe they feel that they don't bring enough to the table, or possibly, have some imposter syndrome in regards to who am I to say anything? Who am I to lead? Who am I to step up? And it was really refreshing to sit down for, at some points, hours on end, talking to groups of individuals who share my belief in humanity, share my fervency for men becoming greater than they are, share my tenacity for making a change and an impact on the world. And so, whether it's the Lions Den or Arate with Andy Frisella and then Milet, or Apex with, Ryan Stewman, there are groups out there that will allow you and facilitate you to build a tribe of like-minded individuals. And I've talked about this before on the podcast. It is extremely critical for you to set your perimeter, both for yourself and for the people that you surround yourself with, as it'll simplify a lot of the questions and the doubts and the fears and the, inconsistencies within your life, not inconsistencies, the inadequacies within your life. For instance, if you have negativity in your life and those are in the form of people or doubters, picking the right tribe will really help to open you up to success and your own personal power. So I highly recommend that you look into that, whether it's my group or Sean's group or any one of these guys' group that's out there. I highly recommend you seek that out. But I digress. So again, this weekend for me was a lot of conversations. If you can't tell, my voice is a little bit harsh. That is because I literally lost my voice because I was talking for hours on end. And I wasn't the only one. It was a lot of deep conversation. But more than conversation, there was a lot of solutioning. And one thing that was said during the event by Garret J, who runs Wake Up Warrior, another group that you could join if that so tickles your fancy, was that we have been taught to give away our dominion. And that struck a chord with me, obviously, because, within Heroes Veritas, within the podcast, within my posts, I have talked very heavily about the courage to remain sovereign, the courage to act in line with your own personal sovereignty, to seek sovereignty, to seek your freedom as an individual, as a man and as a woman. And so when he said we've been taught to give away our dominion, it struck a chord, but it also created some deep reflection. So I really am grateful to him as well for that. And I started to wonder what would cause somebody to accept the idea of no longer needing dominion. And I think a lot of it comes down to words. And I've talked about this quite readily and quite frequently across all of my platforms. Words have become bastardized. They've been articulated in a way that they have lost their value. They've lost their gravitas. And dominion is one of those. Sovereignty is one of those. King, queen, those are some other words that have really become subverted by the way we use them. I've talked a lot also about hyperbole and how a lot of times when we say lofty words that hold a lot of meaning or hold a lot of gravitas, they're oftentimes met with a chuckle or a sarcasm or a satire or parody, because society as a whole has connected these words to something that is less than valuable, something that is cheapened by design. And so when I talk to men about becoming king, when I talk to men about, planting their flag and becoming king and leading their people and setting their perimeter, a lot of times I get looks of confusion. But most of the time, unless they are in this space or they've heard me talk and they really resonate with it personally, a lot of times what I get is this very deep-seated and deep-rooted acceptance that mediocre is the only thing available to them, that being led is the only thing available to them. And I've always had a little bit of contention from that, because I've always been a bit of rabble rouser, for lack of a better term. I really don't like going with the flow unless I understand it. I really don't like following laws unless they're moral. And if you are sitting there like, oh, you don't follow laws, I always have, point to speeding. Most people speed when they don't believe that it makes a justifiable reason to be slow. And so when I'm looking at the phrase, we have been taught to give away our dominion, and looking at looking at it for the podcast and the tactics of like, what does that mean for us? How do we circumvent it? How do we claim our dominion? How do we, justify our dominion? Because a lot of times when we can't step into our own power, it's because we don't feel justified or valid in our own power. And so how do we justify that? So I'm kicking these things around after I heard his speech, and I knew exactly that I needed to talk to the podcast about this or make an episode about this. So first and foremost, reclaiming dominion for its power. Dominion is the ability to remain sovereign. It is you have dominion over your world. And a lot of people look at it this biblically. God gave us dominion over the land and animals, and a lot of people fear dominion because they believe that they connect it to slavery and slave holding, dominion over fellow man. And it's created this very morally tense space, because when you say dominion, a lot of people either A, don't understand it, or B, they understand a nuance of it, or a very linear nuance of it, and they've connected it to a negative moral facet like slavery, or feeling like human life doesn't matter because you matter first. And so first and foremost, we have to claim dominion for what it is. And so I wanted to read the actual definition of dominion so we can understand it. Apologies, my screen is locking and not unlocking. So the definition number one is sovereignty or control. So your sovereignty or control. Or two, the territory of a sovereign or government. So very simple, very amoral, very agnostic. So the thing about dominion is it allows us the opportunity to inject our own morality into the word. And so the first one being sovereignty or control. I mean, I've talked about that very heavily. You need to be in control of your world. And setting your perimeter defines that world. And for some of us, it's just ourselves, and others, it's ourselves are and our queens. For others, or kings, depending on who is watching. And for others, it's even bigger. And I've talked about this before, that of rings on a perimeter that, and I posted a thing about this as well a while back. So if you haven't checked it out, I recommend it. But The beast only knows survival. The man knows his tribe, and the king knows his kingdom, and the hero knows his community, and then the god knows the world. So these are aspirational archetypes that I use to articulate to my clients how they could view their perimeter, how they can view their world. And so a lot of times guys get stuck like, oh, I don't care about anybody but myself. Okay, cool. Well, that's the beast. For lack of a better term, metaphorically, the beast only cares about their own survival. They will, lions will eat their young if they don't fit the pattern. They don't care because it's all about survival. And there's no other emotional and or moral ambiguity to that. It's like kill or be killed. And then when you become a man, you can start to realize that it can expand past yourself, maybe to a family or a tribe. And then when you become a hero, it goes even bigger than that. And then when obviously the god becomes the world, king becomes a kingdom, so on and so forth. And I was just touching base on that very high level. So if it's kind of confusing, feel free to ask questions or go and check out the post I did on my Instagram. So when you're looking at dominion, if you want to get to the level of king, you need to be able to maintain your dominion. And one of the things that, the second part of that is sovereign territory or government property or government territory. But I would say in the context of dominion for your personal dominion, that second one would be allocated to your physical person, your mental person, your mental space, your spiritual space, your financial space, your family space, etc., your relationship space. So in order to have dominion and sovereignty, you have to be able to make your choices for you and not for anybody else. And so reclaiming dominion from a very, a very technical sense, you would literally be able to say, this works for me or this doesn't work for me. And despite any justification from outside spaces, if it doesn't work for you, you still claim your dominion by saying, no, I'm going left when everybody is telling you to go right. And the reason that this is so important, right? So we've defined dominion at the high level, right? Sovereignty or control, and then secondarily, a territory owned by government or sovereign space. And territory in this sense could be mental, spiritual, physical, financial, etc. So now we've defined dominion, we reclaim dominion. Why would you want that? Well, I can give a few examples. And I think a lot of this especially comes up in today's world when we look at medical dominion, medical sovereignty over the last 2 years, personal protection sovereignty, especially in the last couple months with the 2A conversation and the banning of self-protection devices, and financial sovereignty, where there is a huge push, not even a push, there is a looming darkness when it comes to the inflation and the economic decline of the country. And so when you're looking at dominion, you're looking at sovereignty, and I've said get your house in order, I've said set your perimeter, these things fall into that. And so once you define the territory of dominion, you have to get all of it in order, and it becomes very overwhelming. It becomes very easy to sit back and say, no, somebody do it for me, somebody take responsibility for me so that I don't have to take the risk. I don't have to be responsible for the outcome, because what if I'm wrong? What if it goes wrong? What if it doesn't work? Right? These are fear-based scarcity models. And in order to be sovereign and reclaim your dominion, you have to have courage. You have to have a personal responsibility. You have to have the capacity and competence. And so that can be very daunting for a lot of people. And so, when I look at it, I said it today on my Instagram. If you follow my social media, I would much rather be scraping together coins for food and shelter and luxury than having those things provided to me by the government or anybody, not just the government. The government is kind of like a royal concept, right? But a mass widespread concept. But really, it is anybody. I don't want to have to be beholden to anybody, because the reality is, if I am required to pay my way, to earn my keep, food, shelter, luxury, then I rise and fall on my own competence. But if I hand that over in the hopes that they feed me so I don't have to deal with that, then I rise and fall on theirs. And the problem is that their confidence is outside of my control, right? Their priorities are outside of my control. So the minute while yes, it is scary and it's difficult and it's very hard, and taking responsibility can sometimes feel daunting, it is 100% me. And therefore I am in control of me. My priorities are mine. So that means that I can get by on $10 a day, or maybe I need $100,000 a day. I don't know what that is for you, but if you have an idea of your own needs, you never want to hand the process over and the responsibility of that over to somebody else, because they may not share your priorities. They may not share your moral compass. They may not share your expectations. They may not be as competent, right? They could just be all talk and they have no competency behind it. And so all of a sudden you hand over these responsibilities to them and they lack the actual skill set to provide for you. And then you're out. And once you hand over that power, you won't get it back. And so it's super critical, this dominion concept, that we're taught to hand it over. We have to recalibrate, rewire that, relearn that our dominion and our sovereignty is more important than anything, because of the example I just gave. You are the only one that knows your priorities, your needs, your likes, your wants, your desires, and your competency. Everybody else is going to have a different and your morals. Everybody else is going to have a different moral compass, different experiences, different needs, different priorities, different expectations. And so this is going to twist things if you hand that control over to them. So how do you claim your sovereignty? How do you reclaim your dominion on a very tactical level? First and foremost, you have to be honest. And radical honesty is the number one thing that I tell people. You have to know what you want. You have to know what's important to you. You have to know what you need. Bare minimums at the very least. You need to know what you're about. And then you have to start systematically and intentionally going after those things. And you're going to be faced with hard decisions, right? You're going to be faced with high moral dilemmas. Do I go and do this thing because society says I need to go and do these things, or do I risk this thing because of my own personal moral belief system? And I've talked about courage on the podcast before. That's going to take a lot of balls. It's going to take a lot of spine, because it's very possible you're going to have 8 to 10 people telling you you're fucking out of your mind. This will never work. They dismiss you. They devalue you. They tell you you're crazy, you're a psychopath, you're a sociopath, whatever. You have to find your own line. You have to find your own way. And if you do not find your own way, somebody's going to define it for you. And I was having a conversation with a buddy of mine who's very, very sharp. Actually, his episode just came out last week, Ryan King, and he was having some conversations and having some deep debates with some individuals, and he really felt like man had fallen fast, and he didn't understand how we've gotten to that point. And he and I came to the conclusion that where light is void, shadows rise. And so that's really what's been happening, is nobody's standing up and reclaiming their dominion. They're just kind of going along with it and hoping for the best. And so if you become intentional about that and being courageous about it, you're going to ruffle feathers. I think a lot of people think that, oh, I don't want to ruffle feathers, I don't want to make a wave. You're going to make a wave. This last weekend, I made waves just by walking into a room, because I don't, it's just the way I carry myself, and everybody else is, carrying themselves differently. And so it was very palpable that I was agitating people, because I didn't cowtail. I walked in, I wasn't rude and I wasn't disrespectful, but people take notice. And so, that once you start to reclaim your sovereignty, once you start to reclaim your dominion, things simplify very, very easily. And so once you know yourself, you're radically honest, and you really know what you want, then you need to make a plan. And then you need to execute that plan. And that's where that courage I was talking about comes in. And you don't have to go all in, right? I know a lot of people that are like, oh, I'm ready to be sovereign, especially my clients. I want to be free. I want to be sovereign. I want to do this. And they go through the defining stage and they're like, what does that look like? And they're like, okay, this is what it looks like. And maybe for them, they have 10 items that are checked. That is like, this is what dominion looks like. This is what my personal sovereignty looks like. And of those 10 check marks, they have 2 of them that they're actively doing. And of those 2, maybe one of them is just happenstance, but they've never been challenged. So they haven't had to actually be intentional about that item. So that means they have 8 to 9 critical items that they have to completely change in order to reclaim their dominion and reclaim their sovereignty. Well, the likelihood that they're going to be able to do all 8 or 9 all at once, all at the same time with no mistakes and no mishaps and all the consistency of the world is almost impossible. It's highly improbable. That's a very type A, very megalomaniac driven individual. And there's very few of those on the planet. So like fitness, like business, like everything, you have to chop it down into a priority list and do it in small increments. Do it for 30 to 60 days, holding that line, being very clear on that, speaking those things into existence until it's a habit, and then move on to the next one. And you can do these simultaneously, but you just prioritize which one you're going to give yourself zero or very little wiggle room on mistakes. And then the rest can be kind of a little bit more gracious. So for instance, if you're like, man, I don't hold my line, I have opinions, but I don't speak them, or I let people walk all over me, and that one's your most critical, then you're going to have to start to assert yourself. And again, I always recommend you get a coach or somebody, accountability party, somebody in your counsel that will be able to help you identify what this looks like. But you have to start to assert yourself if that's the case. If you're like, man, people walk all over me, you're going to have to start drawing some lines, and you have to accept that it's going to be very uncomfortable because you're breaking social contracts. You are literally telling them, hey, how this has been going on for the last 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, whatever it is, it's not going to fly anymore. Now, you can be cordial about it. You can be respectful about it and be like, hey, just so you know, I'm making a huge change in my life. I feel like I haven't been very assertive. So moving forward, things that I don't like, I'm going to communicate to you and let you know that I don't like it. And we need to figure out a solution. That could be a conversation with your spouse. That could be a conversation with coworkers, family members, friends, whatever it is. Now, the other thing that you have to make sure you're aware of, right? We have honesty of what we want. We have to articulate what we're going to do, the plan. We have to become intentional. We have to start putting it into practice. We have to start accepting the consequences. One of the number one things that I see people run into an issue with when trying to reclaim their dominion is they get all fired up at an event, or they get all fired up when talking to me or talking to a coach or talking to their friends. And they're like, yeah, man, like this is messed up. I'm going to go do this thing. And it's like, okay, cool, go do it. And then when they go do it, it doesn't go the way they thought it was going to. So they go in and they're like, I'm going to reclaim my dominion. And when I reclaim that dominion, that person responds in a negative way. And they're like, no, you're a piece of shit. Or they devalue it. And they're like, oh, so somebody's going through a midlife crisis. That's a big one. You have to realize that is a projection of their negativity because they're afraid you're changing and they're not going to be able to change with you. You have to accept that before you even start. Because if you don't accept that, if you don't believe that to your core and you don't hold that place and you don't plant that flag and go, listen, this is for me, I'm doing it for me. And you have to have an escalation path. If they can't get on board, you have to become okay with letting those people out of your life. And that can be very difficult. But that is one of the necessities of claiming your dominion, is you have to take the consequences of that dominion and the responsibility of the outcomes upon your own shoulders. If you're unable to do that, then you're never going to have your own dominion. And it reminds me of a quote from King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. And she said, the wizard who's helping the Arthur in the movie, she says, pick up the sword. And he says, I don't want to. And she says, well, you keep looking away. And he looks at her and she says, listen, like it's not bad that you look away. We all look away, but that's what makes you king, because king doesn't look away. And so that's a very pivotal and profound moment. And that's very true when it comes to claiming your dominion. That's very true when it comes to claiming your sovereignty. The person that has sovereignty and the person that has dominion is capable of going through it. The person who is unable to go through it will never have sovereignty and dominion. And if you don't want sovereignty and dominion, then don't go through it. But if you want that, you're going to have to accept that you have to go through it. So that was on my heart after the event. I really hope you guys are crushing it and killing it. I've really enjoyed all the conversations, not only this last weekend, but just the people that I've come across in putting this podcast together. The guests that we've got coming up are just phenomenal. We have interviews booked all the way through, I believe, September. So be sure to subscribe. Be sure to turn those notifications on so that you get notified when we drop new episodes. So once again, I do apologize. We did not get this uploaded at the same frequency, but it is Tuesday. It is going up tonight. And you guys should be able to check it out tomorrow. on Wednesday. And then this upcoming Thursday, we have a phenomenal guest coming up around fitness. So if you want to get your body right, you want to get your stuff together, you want to try and, look the part, look Herculean, or if you're female, he also takes female clients. And you've ever been curious about, living a healthy lifestyle, or even going all the way to a stage participation with bodybuilding, Gavin McCourt interview will be coming out this Thursday. And we cover everything. We talk about steroids, we talk about science, we talk about myths, being a coach in the fitness space. And so I'm really excited to have you guys check that out. A lot of tangible, tactical information in that. So as always, like, comment, share, and subscribe. We only grow when you let us grow. And I do apologize for the late one again. I will be sure to make it a point to not do that again. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave a comment, or feel free to follow me and message me over on Instagram, Facebook, or here on YouTube. And I'll check you guys later. Your spirit.